Good evening. Welcome to the Town of East Fishkill Planning Board meeting for November 19th, 2024. Will you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will start with a roll call, starting with John Giovanni.
John Giovanoli.
Don Pappy.
Lori G.
John Eichman.
Richard Campbell.
Ed Miyoshi.
Sarah Bledsoe.
Okay, the upcoming meeting dates are December 17th, 2024, and January 21st, 2025. It's amazing we're almost at 2025. We have minutes from the October 15th meeting. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We also have the schedule of meetings for 2025 that I will read through and ultimately ask for a motion to approve. They are January 21st, February 18th, March 18th, April 15th, May 20th, June 17th, July 15th, August 19th, September 16th, October 21st, November 18th, and December 16th. Could I have a motion to approve those meeting dates for 2025?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, first item on the agenda is Stone Castle.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Charles May. I'm here representing the Stone Castle project, which is a project which is located on Sprout Creek Road. It's a 8,000 square foot warehouse. We have received comments from the town engineer. As a matter of fact, we went through the comments, and if you will look, most of the comments have already been addressed. There were a few that we may want to have some brief discussion on. I believe one was item number 11, which was, we have provided on drawing SL-1 some turnarounds for various truck turnarounds, and I believe that what they want us to do is to be able to see if it was possible that the trucks would have the opportunity to back in and out of the site on Sprout Creek Court. In other words, larger trucks. I think the applicant alluded to the fact that if there were any heavy deliveries and larger trucks, that there would be a lift truck that would actually transport any of the material into the warehouse. But for the most part, the deliveries would be minimal, like maybe one, maybe two deliveries a week. This is not to be considered a commercial project. It's a private warehouse, which is going to be owned by a private developer. So I didn't want anyone to think it was going to be a Home Depot or Williams Lumber or anything along those lines. It'd be completely privately operated for warehousing any of their additional lumber. There could be nails, there could be paint, there could be anything along those lines which would be stored while they are building homes within the Dutchess County area. Yeah, I'm sorry, not lumber.
Had you spoken to Fire Advisory yet? Because the one thing I did notice that I picked up quick was the garage doors on the front of the building, like when you enter the property, and it looks like there's 100 feet from the road surface to the door. So if you had like a bigger tractor trailer in there, let's say 50 plus feet, what at 53, you can get 58 footer. So would that block the egress into the building if they had the tractor trailer there unloading?
To be honest with you, when we were doing the percolation and the deep testing in that particular location, many of the trucks which were making deliveries to the neighbors would actually park at Sprout Creek parallel, and anything or any material that was brought in would be brought in with a fork truck.
So from the main road into the property?
The trucks that would be backing into our facility would be 20-foot trucks, which is stated in the plans. And
So
actually,
none of the trucks are perpendicular to the building?
pardon me?
You're saying
perpendicular,
to the front of the
To
building?
the front.
You're saying now the trucks pull in parallel to
the
the
trucks that
building?
would pull in would be minimal-sized trucks.
Oh,
which
they
would be-
don't- there's
which would
no
be by-
tractor
which would be by
trailers?
the owner.
Oh.
They would be, minimal-sized trucks would be like 20 feet long, and those trucks would be bringing product into the warehouse.
Oh, so there's no tractor trailers?
I can't hear you, sir.
There are no tractor trailers?
There is no tractor trailers that I'm aware of that would be backing into the warehouse. It's not a commercial,
Private?
It's private.
If I could, I'll explain the delivery. Anything that would come in on a
Just come up to the mic.
53-foot, I'm sorry, anything that would come in on a 18-wheeler would be offloaded with a forklift and the material delivered into the warehouse. Most deliveries are 20 to 24-foot Freightliner box trucks, double axles, small trucks. So we don't anticipate.
So the 18-wheeler then would park parallel to the front of the building?
Correct. They would park on Sprout Creek Court. We'd send the forklift out to unload and bring the material into the warehouse.
Now, does that allow passage there? I forget how wide that road is.
I don't know whether it is.
Should be, yeah. It's wide enough.
It's wide.
Yeah, I mean, that was really something that, really, the only thing that stuck out at me immediately.
So are there other questions by board members? If not, questions or comments from our professionals?
As far as our comments go, it was just completely discussed there. What we had pointed out was anything larger than the 20 to 25-foot truck would have to use Sprout Creek. So, and then we put it up to your opinion to think if that was acceptable for there, which we kind of think that it is because it is an industrial court and it's kind of developed for that.
Yeah, I think that as long as there's passage on Sprout Creek, if they were out there, that,
Okay.
right?
Okay, then we have a couple of pieces of business to do. One is, I'm sorry. Oh, did you have a question?
I'm sorry. Will that building be fitted with a fire alarm system?
Yes.
Okay. And the other recommendations we made about the sprinklers, I got your letter today.
Did you get the letter? Yeah. And there will be a knock.
It is what it is.
There will be
We
a knock.
always recommend it because
There will be a knock
sprinkler
box.
put out a fire, we don't have to send men inside, so.
There will be a knock
Knox
box as you
yeah, I
requested.
saw that.
On the
And
front door.
trash was acceptable also, so that was the only question we had.
Okay, thank you. We need a motion to declare lead agency.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And will you be ready for a public hearing on the project at our December 17th meeting?
I would hope so. I mean,
Okay.
we'll send out public notices. We have adjoining property owner addresses. I will submit the green cards. You want to have the green cards submitted to Jackie?
And just work with Jackie on all of that?
At the public hearing?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see that as a problem.
Well, then, could I have a motion to schedule a public hearing for Stone Castle at our December 17th, 2024 meeting?
So moved. Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. We will see you then in December.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is Woodland Estates. This is going to be a public scoping session. I do want to introduce Valerie Monastra.
Monastra, yes, right here.
Valerie is assisting our planning department, and Valerie will take a few minutes to tell us what a scoping session is all about and kind of give us an introduction to the process.
Sure, great. So thank you very much. So I just wanted to start off with, so for the public to understand that this particular project is going to go through an environmental impact statement process. So basically, an environmental impact statement is a document that analyzes the full range of potential significant adverse environmental impacts of what we call the proposed action, which is really basically the project itself. And it also looks at how those impacts can be avoided or minimized as part of the development process. So the first step in developing any sort of environmental impact statement process is to create what we're calling a scoping document. That document basically is a document that outlines the topics that will be analyzed of the potential environmental impacts of the project and that will be addressed in the draft environmental impact statement. So basically what it does is it identifies what will be studied within the draft environmental impact statement. So the scope is meant to identify the significant environmental conditions and resources that may be affected by the project, and it's also meant to focus on relevant environmental impacts to those environmental conditions and resources of the project site. So the scope basically will outline to a larger extent, it'll start off with what's being proposed right now for this particular project is to look at the description of the proposed actions, so there would be information in the environmental impact statement about the project itself. It also describes the purpose and need of the project, and it'll identify all approved and permitted agencies that are required for this particular project. Also, the scope itself, or the scope is proposing in all draft environmental impact statements will include key topics, for example, this particular area, the key topic areas will include land use, zoning, and public policy that's going to be looked at, geology, soils, topography, and steep slopes, community character and visual resources, wetlands and surface water resources, stormwater management, water supply and sanitary sewer, utilities, solid waste, organic waste and recyclables, vegetation and wildlife, traffic, transportation and parking, community demographics, facilities and services, fiscal and economic conditions, and historic and cultural resources. In each one of those topic areas, the draft environmental impact statement will look at the existing conditions of the project site, and it will also look at the potential impacts of the proposed project for the site or for those environmental topic areas. And then it will also identify mitigation measures that help avoid or mitigate those potential impacts. In a draft environmental impact statement, you will also find alternatives, which is basically an analysis of different approaches to the project. And in this scope currently, it's proposing a no-action alternative, which is something that's required as part of SEQR, which basically says, what if nothing took place on this site? What would be the impacts on that? The existing approved plan, which is basically referring back to a plan that was presented to the town in the 1980s, a mix of for sale and rentals. They're also going to look at a development under the CRD zoning requirements, which is the existing zoning today. And then the last one is being proposed for the development of buildings with heights up to 40 feet to preserve additional forested and habitat areas. So tonight's public scoping session really focuses on to take public comments on what you want to see studied in this particular environmental impact statement. Once the town planning board finalizes the final scope, that scope will then, the applicants will then take all that information that needs to be studied. They will provide documents, analyses, and also a full document writing up the existing conditions, the potential impacts, and then the mitigation measures for all those different topic areas. Then there will be, once the town planning board deems the environmental impact statement complete and ready for public review, there will be a public hearing on the draft environmental impact statement, again, taking public comments on what the actual document states and any other additional concerns. And that will also be from all the different involved agencies, which we call anybody that requires any sort of permitting, any sort of technical review, and then the planning and any comments that the planning board might have as well. Then the applicant will have to go back and respond to all the public comments that were received, and then they create another document called a final environmental impact statement, which responds to all the public comments. And then after that point, then the final piece of the SEQR process is what they call the finding statement, which will be the planning board's document identifying how they want to see the project move forward, and then ultimately will be their findings on all the different environmental impacts. So there's a number of steps along in the process, and this is just the first step tonight, which is really identifying what will be studied in the environmental impact statement. The last thing I just want to note is that the scoping session will continue on the December 17th Planning Board meeting, and all public comments will be taken through December 31st. And all public comments can be submitted to the Town of East Fishkill Planning Board, to Jackie, and then all the documents are also located on the Town of East Fishkill's Planning Board site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. So with that, I will accept a motion to open the public scoping session.
So, second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is David Cooper. I'm a partner with the law firm of Zarin and Steinmetz, here representing the applicant, Leighton Properties, the contract vendee of the site, which is about 100-plus acres along Route 376. We are here tonight for a public scoping session. With me is Terry Hahn from LADA, the project planners, Eric Schoenblum from Insight Engineering, our project engineer, as well as my colleague Vincent Padone from my office. Valerie took the words right out of my mouth, so I had a whole kickoff as to setting the scope of the scoping session. What I would say is, just from a practical perspective as to why we are eager to get your input as well as the public input and the consultant team's input, is the scope really serves as the table of contents for the EIS. It's going to lay out the areas of environmental concern that this board and that the public wants us to take a look at, as well as, and probably more important to us, the methodology in which we've all agreed that we're going to study those potential impacts, both to quantify the potential impact, but then also identify mitigation measures that would either avoid or minimize to the extent practicable as required under seeker. So tonight, what we're looking for, less so of a substantive comments about the project itself, more so about the areas of environmental concern and how those environmental concerns should be assessed, so that in the EIS, when it is presented to your board and then eventually to the public for public review, everyone understands how we got to the conclusions that are in there, how the quantification of impact are arrived at, so that we're all sort of on the same page when we've got this very large document before you. To start out tonight, if it's okay with Mr. Chairman and the board, I was going to turn it over to Terry just to take us quickly through the project and the scope where we're at right now. We have provided, as is typical, the applicant has provided your board with a draft scope upon which people are commenting on. So we were just summarize that so that the sort of the table is set for the comments tonight, if that's okay.
Excellent.
Okay, great.
There we go. Project team. Good evening. My name is Terry Ann Hahn. I'm principal with LADA PC Land Planners. We're the planners for the project. David's already gone through our team, so I'll just get straight into the project. It's located on Route 376. It is 100 acres, of which originally it was 110 acres, but 10 acres were previously donated to the town of East Fishkill as part of the recreation fees and discussion, part of the approval of the 1988 previous project, which is known as the Herser property. So that's where that came from. It is located in the sewer district, and it is zoned PRD. The PRD regulations. It's back in 1980, the PRD regulations came into existence. It was in response to push by Dutchess County to acknowledge different kinds of housing units. That back in 1980, everybody was doing single-family homes, and there was a real push to do other things than single-family homes to provide alternates for various different phases of life. The town put together a PRD regulations and zoned many properties. There were several large properties in the town of East Fishkill that were zoned PRD. Fast forward now 44 years later, whoa, that's scary. And there are a very limited number of PRD zoned properties left on the zoning map. This is one of those. But the zoning regulations still, we're going under those regulations and that particular zone. The HRSA project, which was the original approved property with filed maps and the 10 acres, that sort of stuff, was approved back in 1988. It was 478-unit multifamily. It was mostly townhouses. Started construction was in 1989 and 1990. There was a number of, it came through, they put a temporary bridge in, they did a bunch of grading, they took a whole bunch of trees down, they installed a bunch of pipes, they drilled wells, they built a water tower, they started putting the sewer lines in, they did a whole bunch of things, and then things changed, and the economy went weird, and it sort of has fallen into past recollections at this point. But that is kind of our starting point. Our project, which is 468 apartments with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, the required parking spaces on the same site. It's a little bit different than what was previously approved in 1988. We think it's a better project and meets needs that are required at this time. But it would have, it'll obviously meet the New York State DEC stormwater requirements since things have changed. Potable water, there are on-site wells, but again, part of the impact statement will be to update and retest all of the existing wells. This again is part of a scoping session, so there's a whole series of things that we will be updating in order to get that information available for part of the review for the overall project. We're proposing a single access drive to Route 376 and the potential for 2 emergency access, completely gated access points, but that's going to depend on how the town feels. But our opinion is that they should be gated. We're expecting some road improvement requirements at 376, and that again will be part of the scope. That's part of the scope, which will be part of the draft environmental impact statement. We're proposing 2 types of units, what we call a big house unit, and then which is 2 stories, and a breezeway unit, which is 3 stories, located throughout the property. There will be significant amenity package, including clubhouse, pools, outdoor gathering areas, courts, recreation trail, various different programs, and generally, the proposal is for an upscale, high-end community for young professionals and empty nesters. That's our intent. Part of the seeker process right now, the planning board put together a positive declaration which established the need for a draft environmental impact statement, or a DEIS. We did prepare a draft scoping document, which I think that you have, which is at this point 28 pages long already. So I think what we're trying to do tonight is to get additional public comment and your comments just to finish flushing this out so that we can go forward and start preparing the DEIS. As Valerie already said, what's in all of this, it covers everything under existing conditions. Our job is then to collect all that data, do that review, figure out how the project will address these various different factors and identify any potential impacts, and then propose mitigation in order to address those potential impacts. And there will be a series of alternates, which again, Valerie already did. So I won't go back through it again. So our job tonight is to listen to and record the questions to be included in the scoping document from the public and the planning board, and any other written comments. Originally, the written comments were due December 19th, but I hear that was just extended to December 31st. So we'll be collecting all those written comments, putting together an updated scoping document. The planning board will then have to approve the final scope, which I assume that we'll probably do in the January meeting, and then we'll be preparing our draft environmental impact statement. So at this point, I turn it back over to you and to the public.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So as both Terry and Ms. Hahn pointed out, many of the impacts have been identified in the existing draft of the scoping document. That is all, by the way, available online at the town's website, so you can find that document and you can follow along as it's updated and as the studies and the answers kind of come through as to how those items are going to be mitigated. But I'll start then with the board. Are there any comments or questions by the board? Any areas that you suggest that we add to the list of?
Yeah, I'm kind of
impacts?
concerned with the traffic coming in and out of there on one drive. I mean, I walk in town here at the rec, and most nights between, say, 4 o'clock and 5:30, it's almost impossible to make a left-hand turn out of this parking lot due to the traffic. And I'm not sure that how that's going to work, just adding another, a turning lane to get into the development. I'm thinking, we'll go to Brendan and thinking you may need a roundabout there or something to make that, accessible, and so people can get in and out. And, if you're coming out of there and trying to make a left in the Hopewell, that could be a real long wait during that nighttime rush hour.
Well, and I'll speak up for Brandon. He's submitted some suggestions in terms of studying pretty much all of the affected intersections that would be affected by the project. Am I right?
Yeah, right. I think we included, obviously, both ends of 376 at 82 and 52. We did ask that would include all of the unsignalized intersections between those 2 points, and then a few intersections beyond that scope on both 82 and 52. But yeah, pretty comprehensive. We didn't want to leave, we wanted the full range of intersections. They're unsignalized, but we didn't want to just look at the big ones. We wanted to look at the smaller ones too, to just see what impact that would have. To answer your question, Ed, we did have them update part of the analysis to look at different intersection types at their driveway, that it wasn't just going to necessarily be given that it was going to be an unsignalized intersection. We're going to ask them to look at that. We're going to ask them to look at signalization. We're going to ask them to look at a roundabout.
Okay, yeah, because, you've got 468 dwellings. Let's say there's a car and a half per. I mean, you're talking 700 cars there. I mean, that's added to what's there already. That's going to be quite a mess, I think.
Okay, other areas of concern by other board members?
So I have a couple notes. Under geology, soils, and topography, it looked like under C2, I'm seeing it's talking about if excess materials will need to be removed from the site. I think we should also, if they might need to be imported in any place, I think we need the same type of analysis, whether it's cut or fill, and understanding the truck traffic. Brendan, I don't know if this would fall under traffic or not, but during construction, if there's heavy equipment, if there's fill or any other materials being brought in, if we need to know the pathway or make sure that they stay on main roads. I know we've done that in the past where we've had concerns about the stability of the roads. This is 376. So I think as long as it's all highway, it's probably okay, but we just need to make sure we understand the traffic path of the construction. I'm not sure which section this is under. I have I and K listed. I think maybe there was a renumbering in the draft I was looking at. For the fire and rescue discussion, do we need to understand, there were a couple different options with different building heights. Do we need to understand what additional fire equipment or different fire equipment might be needed if we go with, say, a 40-foot building option versus the proposed option? I just want to make sure we're articulating.
The height is not necessarily a problem, it's the access to it. Sorry. It's the access to it. We can easily reach a 40-foot high roof as long as we can get close enough to the building. And that, we've seen the drawings of proposed layout, I don't know, a few months ago. Obviously, we'd like to be kept in tune with any changes that are made, and, you know, as it gets closer to being what's really going to happen, if we have access. One of our biggest concerns is the traffic, because with our firehouse right here, right now, it's very difficult getting in and out with the traffic that we have now that you alluded to, especially with during school time and buses stopped at Cannon Lane. It does limit our ability to get in and out sometimes. Another concern we have is with the water supply. It sounds like they're going to be using on-site wells, and are they going to be sufficient? Is there going to be a water tower of some type there to provide sufficient water for firefighting purposes?
Yeah, my concern would be the volume of water that's kept on site. And in addition with the traffic, it's not just so much the traffic in the immediate area on 376. If you follow that down to the intersection with 52 around rush hour and see how far that traffic extends back east and west on 52, waiting to either come straight through or turn back onto 376, and assuming that the residents would all be coming back up to 376 from 684 of the Taconic, then that would be a concern as well.
Just to let you know, yeah, we did include 52 and I Park Boulevard, Limekiln Road, Hosner Mountain Road. It includes the Taconic ramps, and I think we actually added Blue Hill and Old State Road, just because that's another area that does collect a lot of traffic in a non-signalized location.
Right.
So we tried to be comprehensive in that. And then, Lori, just to address your question, there is sort of a very general statement in the potential impacts of analysis of traffic impacts of the proposed development. We could look to just expand that to make sure that it includes during construction.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, and just also understanding, you know, what type of heavy equipment and things like that are going to be trucking back and forth.
And I guess, too, based on the magnitude of the site and the project, I would like to also understand the phasing, like how you would, beginning to end and in between, where you're starting, where do you head to? I saw you have common areas and different things. So based on the magnitude of the project, obviously it's not built in a very quick amount of time. There would be traffic, both if you fill units as you're still under construction, how's that going to be dealt with from a safety standpoint? How are you going to keep, let's say you have tenancy there away from, the ongoing construction, and then obviously you'll have regular traffic coming in and out, and then construction traffic. So it would create some hazards on site too that would have to be
Yeah, the phasing and
managed.
where and how traffic is
Yes,
controlled.
absolutely.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
Construction phasing, I think, was in there, but maybe specifically calling
Sure.
out if there's going to be residence and construction at the
Yeah.
same time.
So that's, just as an aside, that's in the project description, but you could also request that the applicant just has a standalone chapter on construction impacts, too.
There is one
Okay.
that's related to just construction.
Got it.
That can be added there.
yeah. And on-site supervision of safety, mitigating any issues that might come between your residential tenancy and whatever you have as ongoing construction traffic, let's call it.
Theoretically, school buses, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Other comments? Yes, Dave.
An additional concern for the fire district is the amount of EMS calls that are going to increase. I mean, right now, we're strapped. There's many times we have to call ambulances from out of town. I know the county and the state is working on trying to solve the EMS issue, but who knows when that's going to happen. But that is a concern with the increase in the EMS calls that, this number of units is going to create.
Yeah, so just some quick math. This has the potential, if there's 2 people in every apartment, you're adding 3% the population of the town. Our yearly call volume right now is about 3,600, and that stretches us almost as thin as we can go right now. Your fire and your BLS ambulance protection are all volunteer. Generally, your demographic doesn't provide personnel help back to the town when they move into town, so it's more of a strain than it is a help to us. And so we have on average a call every 2.5 hours or so, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So I'm not sure if you were aware as you plan this project that you are moving into a volunteer fire district and ambulance district, and how that reflects. The simple truth is I can't promise you that when your residents call an ambulance that they'll get one at this point. So.
Okay. Sarah?
Yes. I know that the assumption is that there will be primarily young professionals and empty nesters, alluding to the fact that we don't expect children. But I think given where the market is going, it would be very foolish to assume that there's not going to be a lot of kids living in these units. And I would really love to see a very conservative approach to studying the school district and the impacts on the school district, particularly the elementary schools, but obviously middle and high school as well. The potential for even one child in each of these units would have a significant impact on our school district that's already pretty taxed. So I would love to see a very conservative approach to looking at the number of students that we could potentially be adding to the school district.
Something else along the environmental issues, kind of crazy to talk about now with the drought that we're in, but I'm old enough to remember when this project was called Two Creeks. And so I'm assuming that there's some wetlands out there. And that given the propensity to have 100-year storms these days of, every year or so, rather than every 100 years, I'm thinking that we need to make sure that you're well away from wherever any water is going to be after one of these big storms or a hurricane even. I mean, we get hit with the remnants of those every few years. So that's certainly something that's going to need to be planned for.
So, and I guess along the lines of the water thing, the bigger buildings, are there fire suppression inside those bigger buildings? So they're wood frame construction units?
At this point, that's way too much detail.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so, but I mean, based on the square footage of the building, it would require fire suppression, am I correct?
Oh, gosh, I'd hope so, yeah.
We would hope so.
Yeah.
So I
The one on
guess,
Joe's Mother's Road.
we would like to understand that, and we're going to be on the well
On a well system.
supply, what
Do
the
you know how large the
yield
water
is.
tank is?
It was 500,000 gallons.
500,000 gallons, okay. All right. That's a start.
Okay.
I had another one on section Roman numeral 4, the alternatives. This is, I think, more a technical question. Most of the alternatives are all like kind of based on the PRD. Is there any ability to study an alternative that would be different than the PRD zoning, or does it have to stay in the planned residential?
So no, one of the D looks at the current zoning requirements,
Okay.
which would be the CRD zone. And then E was one that we recommended maybe taking a look at in looking at development of buildings up to 40 feet to preserve additional forested and habitat areas. So if this board wants to add another alternative or have the applicant look at another iteration of the project, you can do that at this point.
Is there anything that, like, just like a regular residential layout or something like single-family home layout or something like that, or is that not a thing for this type of project?
Well, I mean, you could have them take a look under the CRD zone as to, as a typical subdivision. You could even just have it as, a potential layout as a typical subdivision to look at the impacts for comparison. There are a lot of, I think part of the reason why it's looking for clustering is because of the conservation of some of the environmental resources. So in effect.
I'm not opposed to the clustering necessarily. I just, back to the point of, some of the traffic impacts and other things, if there's fewer units, does it have to be?
Well, you could even just ask them to look at fewer units, right? As opposed to having it be a typical subdivision application.
That's fair. And then just this one's maybe a little bit of a silly question. I didn't understand Roman numeral 6 growth-inducing aspects. There's no detail underneath it. I just don't understand what that would be.
Yeah, so this is one of the components in seeker that's required, and so what they have to take a look at is they look at future growth within terms of anything associated with the project that would induce potential growth from other different, maybe a secondary type of growth. And it's also supposed to take a look at other projects that are in the pipeline and just look at overall growth in the area.
Okay, so that was going to be my other question. There are a couple of larger residential developments planned in the town. Are we looking at cumulative impact?
Those,
So
yeah,
that's what
that
this
would
is.
be, yeah, part of that.
Okay. Maybe a little more detail under that with the call-outs of the larger developments that are pending here in the town?
Okay. Other comments by board members? Before I open it up and invite the public to speak, are there any comments by our professionals?
I think the only other thing, John, that we did ask to be added was to take a look at, I know it's not a lot, but take a look at the existing infrastructure that's in place for pedestrians between the site and the hamlet. With the short-term and long-term goals of trying to make the hamlet a more walkable community, and even with the intent of maybe easing some of the traffic burden, then in the part of the analysis to look at what improved pedestrian facilities from the site to the hamlet could potentially be.
Got it. So before I invite the public, I will indicate we did receive, and we invite, by the way, written comments as well. If you choose to do it that way, we did receive an email from a homeowner who lives on Stephen Drive, and he basically commented on several different areas, and I'll just hit the top end of the comments. He was curious about well water, pedestrian safety that we just talked about, roadway traffic, property values, population increase, and stormwater impacts. And of course, he's written a little bit more about that. This will be entered into the public record. Any comments by any of you or other members of the public will do the same thing. And with that, I'll invite members of the public who would like to make comments on potential significant impacts that haven't already been touched on to come to the podium. And when you come to the podium, if you'd be so kind, sign your name. It should be available there. Let us know who you are. And
I've written my comments down and made a copy for the recording people.
Okay. Actually, give that to Jackie. That'd be great.
Thank you. Okay, my name is Bob Ripstein. I live at 3 Jean Court, and I've been here before 1988, been here for more than 40 years, and seen every evolution of this project that's come by. The first one scared me a little bit in that I would have lived directly behind a sewer treatment plant. It was a great thing moving to your house, and 2 days later your wife comes crying, "We're going to have a sewer treatment plant." We don't know that. Well, 40 years later, we don't have it yet. It worries me a little bit where it might go, and if it's near me, let me go ahead and read some of the things I had written down that apply. I'm looking at units that are greater than 2 stories tall and saying, these look to me like they should have sprinklers or positive fire protection of some form. I'm looking at the structures being built on Route 82. Boy, I wouldn't like to live on the 3rd floor of those and have someone have a grease fire on the 1st floor. I don't think you'd get out alive. So I think that's a major consideration, is fire prevention and mitigation. How many parking spots will be provided for each unit? All of that was already present. I never saw these presentations before. Most of the people that live around here have 2 cars, some even more, which says if you had 2 cars per unit, it would be the equivalent of what we see in our community now. Less than that, boy, there's going to be fighting over parking spots, a bunch of other things in there. I think the number of parking spots that have been designated are a little bit light for the proposed number of units, or the number of units are a little bit too heavy for the parking spots available. Will any of these parking spots be covered or an enclosed garage, or will they all be in the open, making it difficult to remove snow? How many units will be made available for senior housing? I'm one of those seniors, might be interested in one. Where would these units be located? Would there be any single stories at ground level? How many units will be accessible by wheelchair? Since one of my neighbors is currently in a wheelchair, and only way he's getting in or out is if you have a long ramp and you're at the ground level, or other suitable ways to get people up. I didn't see anything that looked in there like it was an elevator, senior accessible, wheelchair accessible location. How many units will be equipped with elevators? Suppose we have 3 stories, we can get someone into the first floor, get them up to the 3rd floor in an elevator. Or are they all going to be walk-ups? One of my major concerns living on Jean Court is where will the wastewater treatment plant or sewage pumping stations be located for this site? The prior, like I said, the prior ones had them right behind my house, made life very interesting for the last 40 years. I'd like to know how far away from the existing family homes will they be located? And how far away from the existing residential wells would they be located? My big concern is every machine ever made by man fails at some time. Every tank, the rebar rusts, the cement cracks. We live on a very porous aquifers, Wappinger loam. I forgot the exact, my CAC guys would kill me right now, but it was a Wappinger sandy loam. It's about 18 feet deep. You get anything in there, we've got unlimited spread to the creek and to the adjacent wells. I'd be interested to know, would the developer be willing to provide the PRD water for the residences that say are within 800 feet of these facilities? Other question was, where would we get the water for the PRD? The old proposal was the wetland along 376. It's probably adequate for that, but with the fire requirements and the drought, I mean, this drought could go on for many years. We may have a water shortage. I'd like to know how the character of the existing communities will be changed. The character of the community is an important issue in an environmental statement. Our community we have now with professionals have been here for many, many years. A lot of the people you see in front of you is a friend of mine that I've known for many years in that place. Hardworking people, they take good care of their property. This is a character, this is what middle class wants to be. This is how they want to live. How is this going to change how we live today? I'd like to know, what are the demographics of this PRD? How many people and what are their ages that will be living here? All of that, of course, impacts schools, fire, and the police. These needs should be addressed and how they will be increased, and what the cost of these things will be to the existing town of East Fishkill. They don't come for free. And last of all, what will be the traffic impacts to the surrounding communities? I know everybody in my neighborhood had the same question. When they connect these things on what used to be a major cul-de-sac, all of a sudden we got a throughput for a bunch of traffic coming from, or trying to get around town, getting onto Palin Road by ways of Harrigan, which really can't handle that volume of stuff right now. How will this impact our community? Will there be speed bumps put in place? What will be the noise impacts? It's quiet back there. It's a pleasant place to live. East Fishkill, nice place to live. Nice place to live, right? It is. I hope it stays that way. That's the end of my comments. I've submitted one copy for our board. Thank you for your time. And the other copy is available for the engineers, if you'd like. Thank you.
Could you sign in, sir? If you could just sign in at the podium, there's a sign-in sheet there.
Sign in?
Yes.
That would be a good thing to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Other members of the public who would like to come up? If you'll do the same thing, sign after he's completed his.
Hi, Mary Kay.
How you doing there?
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, neighbors. Good evening, board, especially our fire people. My name's Mary Kay Satriano. I've spent 24 years in the United States Army and counting. Yet there's a lot of acronyms that are being thrown around here that are going way over my head. So as a courtesy to the public, could we spell out and maintain a non-acronym language so that we could all follow along? Is that agreeable?
Yes.
Also, there's a conversation between Ms. G and the town planner that I could not follow. Is there a way that we can be fully informed before we get here so that we can understand what that conversation was?
I think you'll find that the comments by Lori G were things that she would like to see studied. Those items will be studied then by the applicant and will be fully fleshed out, which I think will make it a lot easier.
I'm sorry, I'm confused, because she was referring to Roman numeral something, something, like what
It's
is
in
that?
the document.
It's in the document that's on our website.
It's on the website. So
Yes.
everything that we need to know will be on the website.
Everything-
Anything that we need to know will be on the website.
Everything that we know at this moment is actually available on the website for review by the public, and then it will be updated as the applicant then performs the studies and updates the information. That information will be given to the document. You'll be able to read it.
Fantastic. I look forward to being here at every step of the way in this process. I live on 9 Mark Lane. This is literally behind my home. I didn't spend 3 tours in Iraq to come home to a place that is not nice, that is not friendly, that is not my home. I have a lot at stake at this process. So I want to be fully informed. I think I deserve it.
I think you can count on it. As was indicated earlier, there are many more opportunities for public comment as we go through this process. So we'll be seeing you as we continue to move on, and look forward to your additional comments. Any other comments by other members of the public? Yes, sir.
My name is John Connealy. I'm a 30-year resident of Stephen Drive. Many of the questions that I have been touched on: traffic, rentals versus purchase, the quality of people that would come with that. I currently am employed as a consultant with a bonding company, so we confirm that jobs get completed. So what does the town have in place when this digging starts and all this land is opened up to children, bicycles? What do we have in place to make sure that this project gets completed? Because with the history of this one, this has gone up and down and up and down. And is there a bonding process in place?
There is.
A dollar value of this project?
There's no way to really tell you that at this point, because we're so early in the process.
An
that there's.
approximate? Is this $10 million?
I'm not sure that we have a number, do we? Ms. Hahn? It really is.
I think, though, if you were to ask that we included the environmental impact statement to describe what the bonding process after construction is, that would be something we would add.
Does the town have something in place for a bond
Yes.
for a project this big?
Yes.
Okay, we do. So that's a performance bond that's going to confirm. Was there a bond in place for the previous projects that failed?
I can't tell you. It's 44 years ago. It's not clear. Do you have any idea? But there will be a bonding process, and I think the suggestion by Ms. Hahn that...
Well, the answer would be no, because if there was a bond in place, the project would have been complete. So we're saying that there's legislation now, there's a law in place that's going to make sure that when we put the shovels in the ground, we're digging holes, rebar sticking out, that this one's going to get complete?
I think you'll see the process written up, I think would be the best answer for you tonight.
If it doesn't, isn't the bond forfeit?
No, they bond any public improvement. Any public improvement. The
Yeah, it's not
stormwater
a-
basins would be bonded, things like that nature. Lighting would be bonded, public improvements would be bonded.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they have to build all the rental units.
Correct. Like you're talking, I think we're talking about two separate things, and it probably
Water
should go
system
through
would
the
be
attorney.
bonded, certain things would be bonded, other
Right,
things wouldn't.
and he's talking about like if there were sewer connections open and things of that nature.
I'm talking about this entire project. Once we do approve a portion of this or in its entirety, are we going to confirm that this project has a bond on it that's going to complete this project this time?
I think it's a question for the town attorney.
So
We don't have a town attorney here tonight?
we do not have one here tonight, but I think your point is well taken, that a study of the bonding that will be put in place as a part of the project scope is something that will be included in the scoping document. So you will see this, and there will be plenty of time to comment on it as we go forward. This public hearing will be extended to December. And while you probably won't see anything on the bonding by that time, still, then there's still, am I correct about this, Valerie? There's still even then a public hearing process once the document is substantially complete so that you can comment. And then we also have the entire site plan process, which is when we really look at all of the details of the project, and bonding requirements will be a part of that as well.
Has the developer thought about the cost of these rentals? Are you guys anywhere near? Nowhere near. So we don't know if these are $1,000 a month?
Sir?
That's probably still a little premature at this point. What we're trying to identify right now, to be fair, and I don't mean to cut you off, but we want to identify major environmental impacts. And we're asking the applicant to then study all of those things. When it gets into the design of the real design of the units and the cost, the rentals and all that kind of thing, I think that's a little bit early. Now, we will hear that as we go through the project before it's finally approved. We'll know, but it's premature at this point.
Okay, because that does lead into, as we've touched on, volunteers. This was talked about with young professionals and seniors, which we know we're not getting volunteers out of for the emergency departments. And I do see some statistics on the town sites about the level of income for people under 30 and people over 65. So that would lead into that question. The other one that might be more towards the environment will be the discharge of the sewage. I did hear the developer talk about possibly running that under the Fishkill Creek.
I believe the applicant plans to connect to the town's sanitary.
All right, because there was two options brought up at the May meeting, one of which was connecting that way and one of which was going under the Fishkill Creek.
Well, they'd have to go under
Underneath
to
the
get...
Fishkill Creek. We have a line under the Fishkill Creek as well.
So it would.
Yes.
Which feeds the aquifers.
And that would all require DEC permitting.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm signed in.
All right, good evening, board. My name's Zach Newman. I'm here with my wife, Elena Newman. We purchased our home at 40 Stephen Drive just about 2 years ago. So I know we've been talking about young professionals that would move into this rental community. We are young professionals, you know, and now homeowners. I work for IBM nearby. My wife, Elena, is a teacher at a nearby community. We're actually expecting our first child this spring. And during our home search, we looked for a family-friendly neighborhood, you know, one with privacy and safety to start, you know, a family of our own. And this is exactly what we found in the Stephen, Mark, Jean, Anthony community. You know, the neighborhood that's directly impacted by this. So this, you know, this type of neighborhood attracts prospective homeowners like ourselves. You know, we're ready and eager to invest in the East Fishkill community, and we were formerly renters, you know, so we understand that community and that perspective as well. But I want to say that atop our concerns for this is the, you know, among other things, and it's been talked about, right, the increase in traffic, the, you know, elimination of our kind of safe, quiet cul-de-sacs, right? We have some immediate safety concerns for our future children. You know, we're envisioning them as a place to teach them how to ride bikes, to walk. You know, we would not be able to do that here with the immense traffic impact that this would have. Some other questions or considerations that I would like the board here to take forward. Some were already mentioned, but as far as the risk of fire, I think now we have to consider this given the historic drought that we're facing. When we include fire risk, is it included that you know, the risk of spread to our neighborhood with something that's, you know, this magnitude that would be built behind us? A term was brought up. I think the term like character analysis. I'd be curious to know what that means, community and character analysis, right? So I'd be curious if someone could define what the definition of that would be. I also heard viewing, so I'm curious to define what viewing means as well. Is that sight line? Now, of course, we know all the insane amount of leaves have fallen, right? Our sight line would be directly, you know, from our neighborhood to where this community would be. Is that being included, as well as the light pollution? You know, right now we have clear view up to all the stars at night. You know, with the parking lots, the amount of cars that are going to be there, are we having street lights that are going to be on all the time at night? That's going to impact that as well. Let's see here if there's anything else. I think everything else was covered, so just wanted to get our concerns out there, right? We are, you know, when you look for young families to enter the community, we are those that were attracted to East Fishkill, and, you know, we feel this goes against what the neighborhood that we were moving to is all about. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is John Morgan. My wife and I have lived at 24 Stephen Drive for 27 plus years. I'd like to thank the Town of East Fishkill Planning Board for considering my remarks and the remarks of other neighbors this evening. Additionally, I really want to recognize that throughout this process, our planning board is in a difficult position. You need to balance the property rights of the developer who proposes a bloated and inappropriate project against the rights of the neighboring citizens, current taxpayers, and residents, current and future, of the town of East Fishkill. I want to assure that the secret scoping document pays careful attention to each of the following general concerns throughout this process for a parcel of land that has already had at least two that I know of, not just one, previous proposals come before the town board for consideration and some level of approval for various reasons. Neither of these projects, despite various and fairly thorough levels of review about 20 years ago, were ever built. I would note that when we were here 20 years ago, when the ceiling was taller and planning board sat over there, and you know, there weren't the level of changes that there have been in this room. Other neighbors who have since moved out of Mark Lane spoke of when the development that you referenced earlier was being done, that there was blasting, and there were holes that were made for basements, and people along Mark Lane actually had foundation damage during the construction that 40 years later never led to anything. So that's a concern during the construction process. Natural resources of the community are a primary concern of mine. When 20 years ago, the most recent project for this proposal came forward, the number of housing units proposed was approximately, or actually I believe less than half of the current proposal. Just because additional density can be contemplated does not make that level of density a good idea with regard to this immediate area's water supply, sewer capacity, roadway and traffic capacity, educational capacity, and the impacts on open space and wildlife. And with regard to town sewer and town resources and DEC approval, with all due respect to our best human efforts, as Mr. Ripstein mentioned earlier, at some level, whether it be a small leak or a large leak, all of these things ultimately fail. And we need to keep that in mind when we're talking about going underneath a major supply for water, which as we know, it takes a long time to actually starve to death. But without safe water, you can die within 3 days. The smaller project that was presented approximately 20 years ago, since that time, multiple projects that have since been built or are currently under construction did not exist just within the confines of the area bounded by Route 376 right here, Routes 52 and 82, and Palin Road. So right within that area, we've had other large projects come in that have impacted all of the things that have already been addressed. And that is, that's very important. And again, that project for this particular parcel was half the size 20 years ago. The projects that have been built or are under construction since have outstripped what that project would have done at that size 20 years ago. Traffic and congestion, I know we've already talked about that. It was my assumption when I came here this evening, based on the maps that I saw, not that the connection to Mark and Stephen would be gated, but that those would be thoroughfares. However, I would point out that I still remain concerned about that, whether at this early stage, which we've acknowledged it's early, says that that will be gated. Approximately 20 years ago, due to concerns that fire advisory and fire commissioners had, actually one less unit was proposed being built to allow for a hookup to Mark. So I'm going to proceed as if those won't be gated with my remarks for the next minute or so. I know that traffic studies and vehicle approximations will be part of the scoping documents. I also asked the planning board to strongly consider the professional engineering study and report that was presented to this planning board during the previous Twin Creeks public comment period, approximately, but I believe a little more than 20 years ago. This report was actually presented by a professional engineer that came here and stood here in this room, and a hard copy was presented to the board at that time. The highlights of that report, as I recall, focus on the complete inability of neighborhood roads, including but not limited to Harrigan Road, Stephen Drive, and Mark Lane, to handle additional traffic. Harrigan Road in particular is a narrow, winding, and hilly road bounded by utility poles just off, I'll say the shoulder, but there really is no shoulder, rock walls, and trees that have been in place for decades and decades, big trees. Since the professional engineering report that the Town of East Fishkill Planning Board has been in possession of for more than 20 years was prepared, the only significant change to Harrigan Road that I am aware of is a fenced-in electrical apparatus immediately off the shoulder of the road. In other words, there have been no road improvements. I am concerned that the possibility of additional traffic on Harrigan Road, which experiences accidents on a regular basis during snowstorms, will create a severe traffic hazard and safety hazard for current and future residents. Quite frankly, I stand here right now shocked that a full-size pickup or SUV has not ended up in the back of a landscaping trailer because 20 years ago, not as many people had landscaping services. Now you come around a blind turn and there's the ramp. Like I said, I'm surprised it hasn't happened. So traffic and pushing any traffic onto Harrigan Road is a major concern. Connecting an overbuilt development in close proximity to a fairly recently built dense community right across the street from Town Hall to an existing neighborhood would be irresponsible and borders on cruel to current homeowners and taxpayers. We've mentioned the schools. The Wappinger Central School District provides one of the highest graduation rates in Dutchess County and does so with one of the lowest per student expenditures in Dutchess County. The resources of our school district has to be an important one for all of our families. Taxes are also an important consideration, underscored by the chart that I walked past in the lobby of Town Hall when I came in this evening, that I'm assuming the elected officials who appointed the planning board members made a point of putting out there. So the Wappinger Central School District is actually already on record in writing. You're aware of that, Mr. Chairman? You've received, okay, to the Town of East Fishkill as to how damaging such a large project would be in such close proximity to the most southeasterly elementary school in the Wappinger Central School District, which I believe I mentioned is the 8th largest school district in New York State outside of New York City, and already includes 15 buildings, 10 of them elementary schools. Unless the applicant is willing to donate land on which a new school can be built, then the size of the project must be scaled back, no matter what the demographic projections that have been provided to this point say. Young, upwardly mobile couples, well, we know what young couples do, so I'll leave it at that. And we know what that leads to. Children that go to school. And I think the school consideration in terms of the impact on our community. As you know, the Wappinger Central School District covers more than 100 square miles. So the impact on the taxes of additional burden on a school district stretches far beyond the Town of East Fishkill and really impacts a pretty large swath of southern Dutchess County. And I would like all of that considered. Thank you again for your time and attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? If not, then we will carry this over to our December meeting. And I think, as Ms. Hahn indicated earlier, we're actually extending the period for the draft scoping document to be considered by this board to January?
That's correct. The State Environmental Quality Review Act, it's a mouthful, but it's a good point. The State Environmental Quality Review Act requires a lead agency to adopt a scope within 60 days of it being filed, unless there's an agreement with the applicant to extend that time. We would agree to extend it to the January, you said it before, was it 12th or whatever that meeting was? 21st?
21st.
January 21st meeting, because to give us more time. So.
Excellent. Very good. Any final comments?
Not tonight.
So,
sorry?
We did have one question. So the alternate suggested by Valerie was 40 feet as an alternate, in other words, to go a higher building. I would just note that from our perspective, 40 feet, it does not mean 4 stories. So if you really meant 4 stories, we should say 4 stories.
Right, so I think, I can't remember my exact comments. I think you added the 40 feet.
Oh, that came from the comments that we received from you specifically.
Okay.
So I just want clarification on that. So if you intended to say 4 stories, it should say 4 stories.
And I think the idea is, if the idea is to add the density up rather than out,
Right.
you're going to need a story, not the feet, right? Because you couldn't put another level there. So if the idea is, could you go up instead of out to a reasonable degree, if we could change that to story rather than 40 feet, or I guess, sorry,
Okay.
4 stories, not 40 feet, that would be helpful.
And we'll be sure to pass that on. That may very well have been Michelle Robbins' comment or something. We'll pass that on.
It's just confusing, and I think it would be the easiest way to do it. Plus, it has to do with specifically dealing with the fire control element. So that's, however you, it becomes your document, so whatever you choose to do at that point, but we just want to throw that out.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
And just for the
Thank you.
record, we're doing January 21st. You're keeping the public comments open till? Or-
No, I think our plan is what we want to do is adjourn the public scoping session to our December meeting.
Right.
Create an opportunity for 10 days or so after
Right.
that for any final written comments.
Right, to
by-
December 31st.
By members of the public.
Yeah.
And then ultimately consideration of
The final
The final,
scope.
right.
final
So-
scope.
Yes,
On the
okay.
January
Wait, let me
meeting.
start. We're both speaking. So we have to consent to the actual adoption, but I think the idea was is that the
Okay.
comments would go to December 31st.
No, I just want to make sure it was clear for the public, too. Yeah, okay.
So, yes, Dave?
On the height versus stories, so are you proposing 4 stories,
No,
3 stories, peak of the roof 40 feet?
Okay, clarification, I'm sorry. So part of the alternative consideration was to increase the height of the building in order to condense the area that could be disturbed.
Right.
Obviously, that will have an impact on our discussions with fire. We'll be in touch to talk about that, but we just wanted clarification for purposes of asking those questions as to which direction they wanted to go.
Because our concern is a 4-story building plus the roof may be 50 feet.
Correct.
And that makes a big difference.
Yep.
That 10 feet makes a
Understood.
big difference about placement of apparatus.
Agreed, but at this point, we're not prepared to go, our proposal does not include that. That was a proposal that came from staff as a thing to consider, and at that point, we would also talk about what the difference between is with respect to fire and safety, elevators, all that good kind of stuff. So that's just an ongoing discussion.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay.
Apologies.
So may I have a motion to adjourn the public scoping session to our December 17th, 2024 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, there's one last item that is not on the agenda, but Scott Bryant, the town engineer, wanted to speak to some concerns that have been raised with regards to another proposed project. And Scott, let me turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. So there's a project on Donovan Drive, proposed project, treetop development for a warehouse, and they've appeared before the board. They've met with professionals. Their design is an ongoing, process, and as part of Seeker, they need to do certain testing on the site. They need to, do infiltration tests for their stormwater basins, for instance, on-site septic system. They're going to be drilling test wells. The site, is like a jungle, between fallen trees and brush and everything, and they've made a request to go in and brush hog recently, and they started about a week ago. They are not cutting trees, they're not disturbing soil, they're not removing stumps. However, it is a large parcel, over 100 acres. We've got a lot of calls from concerned citizens, and, given everything and the magnitude and the size of the site, we thought it might be prudent to kind of memorialize what they can and cannot do, what's expected of them, and I've outlined all that in a memo. And I've also recommended we have an environmental monitor keep tabs on things to make sure that they're doing what they're allowed to do and limit it at that. So I don't know if there's any questions. Everybody get an outline of what I proposed.
So that environmental monitor would be at their expense?
Would be at their expense. They probably go to the site twice a week while this is going on.
Yes, okay.
And again, it's just to assure everybody, all local residents, that they're doing only what they're allowed to do, because quite frankly, to cut brush, to stack and cut dead trees that are laying on the ground just to have access to the site, I think that's reasonable, but we want to make sure it doesn't go beyond that.
Yeah.
And we want to assure the local residents that it's not going beyond that, so.
What's the definition of brush? Is there like a diameter?
Well, they go like with a brush hog. It's just thick, pricker bushes and maybe small saplings, They're not cutting trees with chainsaws. They did have chainsaws out, which caused a lot of phone calls, but I went there myself, and it's just all these fallen down dead trees that just make it hard to get around the site, and they do need to access the site to do all these required tests.
So we don't need to be specific here as to the...
Well, we've asked for them to kind of give us a map showing the areas, because I don't think they're going to be digging test pits through every square foot of 100 acres, but identify the areas that they're going to be working in so that we have a better grasp of that. And, to memorialize it, because we've gotten a verbal, but we don't have anything written at this point, so.
Or would they be like marking off trees that they can't cut down, like how they can?
They're not cutting trees. They're not permitted to cut any standing tree. Dead or alive, they cannot cut a standing tree.
Okay.
So I think what we want to do is I'll accept a motion to require that the applicant provide a site plan illustrating the areas where the activities are being performed that are discussed in this memo, and a requirement that an environmental escrow account be established in the amount of $5,000 prior to the commencement of any site activities that will cover the cost of the environmental monitor.
Right. And I would like to add that they had started doing this work. I asked them to stop, and they agreed to stop for a week or two till we could, properly address and come up with a plan to move forward.
So is there
they
an
have been
official
cooperative.
stop work order on?
Not an official stop work order. It's more of a courtesy stop at this point.
Okay, fair enough.
Does that address the phone calls that people are, is that what they're?
Time will tell if all this addresses those phone calls or not.
Sorry.
What are there any other?
But it's an effort. It's an effort to address them, let's put it that way, okay?
Are there any other
Best effort.
reasonable concerns other than that they're clearing and they don't want them to?
People don't want a warehouse in their backyard.
Okay, so that's what I was.
I think the concern
It's
is
the simple answer, yeah.
they believe that something's been approved that hasn't been approved, and they can't.
Well, once they see activity, they think it's all approved and it's coming, and there's still a process, and we're telling them there's still a process, but, they still own the land, they have a right to do these tests that are required, and,
Well, not to mention social media was all over the place. I saw it, so.
Yeah, and once the chainsaw come out, they were cutting trees, but I went there and looked at them, these are just dead trees. They're like matchbox sticks strewn around the ground,
So can I ask one of our board members to offer that motion that I articulated a moment ago?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right, thank you.